Each and every Wednesday, we will be here to discuss, you guessed it, our rest of season top 150 rankings and how that plays into the season-long trade market, our redraft trade calculator, buy lows, sell highs. Stay tuned to the end for moves to make, one from each of us, and more. Let's start with some interesting spots here and talk a little panic or chill, buy or sell. There's a lot of victory laps being taken right now on J.K. Dobbins, Daigle, and I actually don't blame them. I really don't. Like, if you were in on J.K. Dobbins, you ignored all the injury stuff, right now you can take your victory lap. I would be cautious personally about taking that lap because J.K. Dobbins has such a wretched injury history. Not that he's quote-unquote injury prone, that when you have an Achilles tear and multiple knee tears on your resume, the ability to handle big workloads over the course of a 4-month season, I think is strained. So, take your lap now on Dobbins. I'm still a bit skeptical, but maybe I'm just a huge Dobbins bear. We are up to 64 overall now in our rest of season top 150 on J.K. Dobbins. How would you be handling it right now, Dobbins, in the trade market, Daigle?
It's not just the injury history that's in the back of our minds, but so far the nut run out for the Chargers. And Dobbins has looked great in particular. He's fourth in forced missed tackles per carry at Pro Football Focus. He's averaging a league high 9.8 yards per carry, also sustainable. But so far, this schedule for the Chargers has just been exactly what helps J.K. Dobbins. The 7th most plays run in the league with a lead against the Panthers and Raiders. But then look at this upcoming schedule against the Steelers, Chiefs, Cardinals, and Saints. We would imagine they have to go through the air more. Not only that, but the usage for Dobbins actually hasn't been that great, as oddly as that is. Just 46% of the team's running back carries and only 49% of their backfield touches. So overall, I at least want everyone to gauge what Dobbins can bring back, because I swear, I think you can get players like Chris Olave, Tank Dell, Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he can upgrade your entire roster. And right now, since everyone is so injured around the league, perhaps you're a team that needs to fill multiple holes. I think Dobbins can do that and help you win the rest of the way.
Yeah, I think all super interesting points on possibly selling Dobbins. Now, I think the strongest point that Daigle made there is you do not see backs who are timeshare backs, which I think Dobbins will be for the duration because they know his injury history. You do not see timeshare backs without a pass game role, and Dobbins does not really have a pass game role right now. You do not see these guys finish as the RB2, as the RB3 for the whole season. We have him right now as the RB16 against 64 overall. Obviously, if I could get someone in our top 40, in our top 30 for J.K. Dobbins, I'd be willing to do that. And to Daigle's point, people are like so excited about Dobbins now. Maybe you can get that. So yeah, I think those are all really good points on Dobbins for sure. All right, Mark, let's go to this Miami stuff, man. It's not just like direct injuries, and there's been so many direct injuries. It's also other injuries. All the Packers guys are in big trouble until Jordan Love gets back. I don't think it's going to be as bad for the Dolphins guys with Skylar Thompson, but it's certainly not good. We've stuck pretty high on Achane at 11 overall. We've stuck reasonably high on Tyreek at 12 overall. We've dropped Waddle down to 48 overall. We're guessing that Tua is going to be back in week 8 right now. If you think Tua is going to be out longer, then these guys need to come down lower, I think. And that's certainly in the range of outcomes that he just says, forget it, man. I don't want to play football anymore. I have no idea what he's going to decide. So, Mark, what do you think about handling Dolphin stuff right now if you have them in the trade market?
I think for the most part, I'm holding or trying to buy high on Devon Achane, just given the fact that he saw 29 touches in week 2. Skylar Thompson so far in his career has targeted the running back position quite a bit. And I think the thing that can help keep this Dolphins offense afloat is just how concentrated all the touches are here. I mean, we have Achane, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and then you can maybe throw Jonnu Smith in there as pretty much the 4 Dolphins that are going to touch the ball, maybe 80-90% of the time here for this offense. So even though we expect the efficiency to come down with Skylar Thompson at quarterback, I do think the volume can stay there. And I will reference a Daigle tweet here as well. When Skylar Thompson made 3 starts with the Dolphins in 2022, Tyreek Hill was targeted on over 30% of his routes. Not a great yards per target in this one, but Tyreek certainly someone who's going to get screens, stuff close to the line of scrimmage that he can, build yak after, still big play threat down the field. So I feel best about Tyreek and Achane holding their value, at least until, Tua comes back. Again, no one really knows exactly what the timeline is there. We are kind of expecting him to come back in week 8 when he's eligible at that point. Waddle, I think, is a potential sell low, especially if you're 0-2. I'm not really sure what value Waddle will provide to your team over the next few weeks. The Dolphins also have their bye in week 6. So I think now is potentially a time to get out from underneath Waddle. But in terms of Achane and Tyreek, I'm pretty much holding them at this point and hoping their ability can take over, and that Mike McDaniel's scheme can still get them touches with upside, and the touchdown should be pretty concentrated between those two as well.
Yeah, I think the problem is like, who wants to buy Jalen Waddle right now? He hasn't done much, and now Skylar Thompson is his quarterback. I don't know what you're going to get for Waddle. We have him 48th overall. I wouldn't want to like totally sell Waddle for nothing, but I hear you. If you're 0-2 with Waddle, it is not a good situation right now, so you might have to explore something. Just going back to the Achane point, also in those starts, running back target rate was really high, and like, people say, oh, how can you guys have Achane up at 11 overall? How many running backs in the NFL these days actually are going to get 29 touches in a game? I mean, I didn't think that was really what would happen for Achane if something happened to Mostert, but they showed last Thursday in week 2 that they're willing to give Achane 29 touches in a game. Just completely ridiculous. All right. Let's go to the Rams stuff, Jack. I mean, did the team by team yesterday with Silva, and he was like, yeah, like Rams season is basically almost over. I mean, it feels like it's over already right now. Losing their defensive coordinator has sent this defense just into a tailspin. Losing Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua is obviously absolutely awful. And now 3 offensive linemen down once again here for the Rams. We still have Kyren up at 25 overall, but all these other guys, Puka, Cooper Kupp, Demarcus Robinson, Whittington, Colby Parkinson, it just doesn't feel great right now. Jack, what do you think about handling Kyren? We have him 25th overall, the RB7.
Yeah, I think he's one of the harder players to evaluate because it's pretty fragile. I think in the short term, he is going to get quite literally as much as he can handle. He had a 19% target share in week 2. Even though he's out there on every snap, he typically has not been a guy to get a huge target share, but I think with both Kupp and Puka out, he really could get up there, up in the maybe even 15+% target share range. Blake Corum played 8 snaps last week. He got a carry on all 8 just to close out the game. He's not a threat right now. They're going to give Kyren the ball, or they're going to have Kyren on the field pretty much every snap while the game is still in question. They are big dogs at the Niners this week, so there's a chance that we do get another blowout here. So I think in the short term, it's definitely not the end of the world for Kyren. I still think that the volume is going to be so good. There is just a chance, especially if Stafford gets even a little bit dinged up, that they just completely mail it in, and that would worry me a lot on Kyren. So I think for the next 2 or 3 weeks, you can feel very confident in him. And then you'll kind of just have to see where it goes from there. But there's definitely some risk if the floor just completely falls out on the entire team, really. But if you can make it, if the Rams can somehow survive to week 8 or 9 and they get Kupp or Puka back, there's still some likelihood that in 2 months that the Rams are back to at least being respectable.
Yeah. I mean, very few players in the NFL have the role that Kyren has. Obviously, efficiency is going to be a big concern here as his team kind of falls apart in front of our eyes. I would guess that if you have Kyren, there's not much you can do other than hold him right now. I highly doubt anyone can do much else. Daigle, let's go to this Jordan Mason stuff. So Christian McCaffrey, aggravated. Now they're talking Achilles. Honestly, the earliest he can return is week 6. There's been speculation he can miss more than that. Jordan Mason continues to shred from a rushing perspective, and now Debo is out as well. So we have Jordan Mason at 78 overall. Again, when we're doing these rankings, you still have to think about where is production most valuable. Yeah, Jordan Mason's great right now. What will Jordan Mason's value be when we actually need him the most or need our players the most? Week 15, week 16, week 17. So still trying to think through back-weighted stuff. But yeah, Daigle, where are you at on Mason and CMC? There's certainly kinds of teams right now that can trade for CMC. It's a risk, but if you have a really good team, there's certainly teams that can trade for CMC right now too.
with Mason even out snapping Isaac Guerrero 58-1 this past week. They just don't care about giving any other running back on that team the ball. And Mason was honestly the hardest conversation we all had on our call and adjusting everything last night, because it's purgatory. It's a player that I believe you should hold, but also if and when Christian McCaffrey comes back, he's probably unplayable, but he's undroppable as well, since we're seeing how they utilize him. Not only that, but Christian McCaffrey's timeline has now extended on 3 separate occasions. It's only gotten pushed back longer. So what exactly is the return? We don't know. I think Mason, maybe not someone I'm trying to trade for, although I'm definitely not against it, but certainly a hold. And again, as long as he's out there, from the volume alone under Kyle Shanahan, he's a top 12 running back. It's that simple.
Yeah, I mean, if I have a really good team and a reasonably sized bench, I would be interested in seeing if the Christian McCaffrey owner is completely panicked right now. We have Christian McCaffrey at 37 overall. Like, assuming he gets back in, even if it's week 10, by the time the fantasy playoffs come, he could be at full strength and you're able to add that to a team that's in the playoffs. That seems really strong to me. Speaking of not strong, this Bears start has been bad, Mark. I don't even want to blame Caleb, even though Caleb does not look good. I don't want to blame Caleb. The scheme is all messed up. He didn't have Keenan Allen last week. The offensive line is getting absolutely decimated, especially up the middle. They can't run the ball. I don't want to say I'm full panicked, but I'm like, DJ Moore looks like he's on massive tilt, by the way, like massive tilt. I don't want to say I'm full-blown panicked, but I'm getting towards downgrading my Bears bags, not writing them to 0. I've written plenty of bags to 0. I'm not going to write it to 0, but I'm writing them down for sure. Mark, what do you think about Bears' chances of a rebound here? Because they're going to be almost free in the trade market. I mean, a lot of these guys are not going to be expensive whatsoever in the trade market.
Absolutely. I think people are panicking on the Bears in general, especially after that primetime game against the Texans, where we saw one of the best defensive lines in the league just absolutely get after Caleb Williams all night. I do think there is reprieve coming up. They go to Indy this week, then they get the Rams, Panthers, Jags. They have a bye and then play Commanders and Cardinals. Those are matchups I want to attack in fantasy. And so I do think now is a pretty good time to buy on the Bears. Roma Dunze and DJ Moore, especially, I'm a little worried about buying into Keenan Allen's heel injury, especially just coming into the season as, over 30. We were potentially thinking that injuries were a risk for him, and that's already the case. So I do like buying DJ Moore low and Roma Dunze now as well. I think Roma Dunze would almost be pretty much free, although the people that were drafting Rome are likely sharp drafters expecting the rookie wide receiver to get better as the season goes along. But regardless, I do think now is a great time to buy low on the Bears. Certainly, the offensive line is a concern. I'm not sure I'd be buying DeAndre Swift for that reason. I'm not sure this running game really has much wheels to ever get going at this point, but I do want to buy low here just with the upcoming schedule. And I think things are going to get a lot better, especially just considering coming off that primetime disaster where Caleb was getting throttled play after play.
Yeah, I like where we have most of these guys ranked on the Bears here. The only thing I'll say about Shane Fraudrin is look what Jaxon Smith-Njigba is doing. Look what DK Metcalf is doing just to start the year. They did not have any games like that, hardly any games like that last year under Shane Fraudrin. So yeah, that's definitely a concern. Speaking of concern, Jack, I'm worried that preseason we were too high on Trevor Lawrence being like an actual fantasy asset to this offense. He just doesn't have good fantasy games. And now he's going to be without Evan Ingram. Didn't have Evan Ingram in week 2. I don't know. I don't know if he's going to play in week 3. Meanwhile, Christian Kirk should have had a much better game against the Browns considering Ingram was out. He had negative receiving yards. So similar to the Bears, I'm a little panicked at least on the Jaguars. Jack, what do you think about them in the trade market?
Yeah, I'm definitely concerned as well. I wouldn't say I'm completely panicked on Kirk. For me, it's just I feel like we have a fairly extended sample size of him being a pretty good player. And similar on Lawrence, even if they're playing poorly right now, it seems weird to me just to throw all that out for 2 games. I will say, though, it really seems like Brian Thomas is the best wide receiver in Jacksonville, and he's going to further establish that by the end of the season, maybe more so over the second half of the season. So that concerns me on Kirk because he's never really been a guy who gets there on not that many targets like Thomas and Gabe Davis kind of can. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not super high on Kirk. You can see we lowered him 13 spots this week, but for the offense as a whole, like I really like Brian Thomas, so I'd be buying him.
Yeah. I think the reason that I was concerned with our pre-draft rank on Christian Kirk is like, all right, let's say Christian Kirk has a solid year. He's not going to bury me. It's not like he's going to go full Malik Neighbors or full Rashid Rice. It's just so unlikely to happen. And so the range of outcomes for Christian Kirk, I thought slanted towards the negatives. But yeah, just really bad start for their pass game in general. Want to get to sell high or hold. Last thing here, Daigle. When we last spoke on the waiver wire show, Kareem Hunt had not yet been signed by the Chiefs. Since then, Kareem Hunt has become part of this backfield, along with, of course, Mr. Carson Steele, Samaje Perine, Keontae Ingram is on the practice squad, and Kareem Hunt is on the practice squad. Presumably one of those guys will get called up for this game, expecting it to be Keontae Ingram, not Kareem Hunt. So now that we know Kareem Hunt's on the Chiefs, Daigle, how are you thinking for the people out there on Chiefs running back?
I still believe Hunt is worth sprinkling on, as is Samaje Perine, but I'm betting, at least in the short term over the next month, Carson Steele will be their guy, as I mentioned in the waiver show, just based on the splits we saw with Isaiah Pacheco still on the field in week 2. 5 carries, including a carry inside the 5-yard line for Steele there, and even in fumbling, went right back to him on that last drive to help set up Harrison Butker for that game-winning 51-yard field goal. Unfortunately, I don't think there's really a rest of season situation to buy in on, because we may also be adding Clyde Edwards-Helaire back in. We're unclear on how long Isaiah Pacheco's even going to be out. So we're talking about 6 guys, not even including Keontae Ingram, who can be involved in this backfield altogether. So I really just think all of them cannibalize one each other. And when I say Steele, Perine, Hunt, it really is their ceilings are very, very limited with each other.
The more I've thought about this, Daigle, the more I've thought that people are just overrating this spot. It's not that valuable of a spot. It sounds valuable because it's the Chiefs. It's just not that valuable of a spot. Like, if you hit and Carson Steele is the man, that's like great, 10 carries or something, and he's going to lose time to these other guys. It's the spot where I didn't want to burn waiver priority or a lot of fab on. So
it's valuable based on where we're at in week 2 of this NFL season and everyone's injured. That's why it's valuable. Right. But yeah, from a context standpoint, absolutely. I completely agree with you.
Okay. Let's do some quick hitters here. Either sell high or hold. I'll give you guys a name. You tell me if you're selling high or if you're holding. Mark, let's go with Jaxon Smith-Njigba coming off of a 16-target game. Sell high or hold?
I think JSN is a hold, especially where you got him in drafts and already seizing that wide receiver 2 slot over Tyler Lockett. I think that's just a win that we were not expecting potentially this early in the season. We obviously expected JSN to overtake Lockett as the season went on, but to already have that wide receiver 2 role seemingly locked up after week 2, coming off that massive target game, I'm definitely holding JSN at this point.
Yes, of course we're holding JSN. He doesn't have Shane Fraudrin. He's an alpha. Okay, let's go to the next one. Jack, Rashid Shaheed, sell high or hold? Rashid Shaheed is the talk of the town. Damn. Anyways.
Yeah, I think hold for sure. He only has 9 targets, but his 9 targets actually lead the team with a 23% target share. I mean, the Saints have just been so dominant through 2 games that they haven't had to throw. Back-to-back 20+% target share games for Shaheed. Obviously, that's a little bit less meaningful given that they haven't had a big sample of pass attempts, but he's never been a guy who's earned a ton of targets. But this year, it looks like he's been able to so far, and he's always been one of the most efficient receivers in the league. So I think it could be just an absolute smash for Shaheed. So I'm definitely holding.
Yeah, and if anybody listens to the team by team, the point that kind of sticks with me on the Saints stuff is, you see, we only have 3 guys in the top 150. They don't even have a wide receiver 3. They don't throw the tight end. And so, they're not using other backs as much as I thought that they would. And so you only get 3 guys here. If this offense is going to be good, all 3 of these guys are going to smash. So yeah, I like holding on Shaheed. Also, Daigle, let's go to Jameson Williams, sell high or hold on JMO?
It's similar to Shaheed, and that Jameson Williams is the reason why everyone's so frustrated about Laporta and his opportunity, because they now have a second receiver who can do it all, including jet sweeps and get down the field. So indoors for majority of their schedule under Ben Johnson, absolutely holding Jameson Williams.
Okay. Two more here. Chris Godwin is like the number one receiver for the tape bros, for the PFF bros, for all kinds of bros out there through 2 weeks. Sell high or hold on Chris Godwin, Mark?
I want to say hold, but I think out of all the guys we mentioned, Godwin is one of the guys I could see potentially selling high on, just given the fact that he scored a touchdown through 2 weeks. He is a bit older. He does have this great slot role in the Tampa Bay offense, but I do think in weeks that he doesn't score a touchdown, especially in half PPR, a lot of his work is going to come closer to the line of scrimmage. Did have that long touchdown down the sideline in week 2 against the Lions, but I do think a lot of games could end up like 6 for 65 on Chris Godwin, which is great. But I think at this point, people are valuing him as a potential wide receiver 1, low end wide receiver 2, just given the ineptitude of other passing games around the league. So out of this group, I could see selling high on Chris Godwin, despite loving the player himself.
Yeah, and I would say on a lot of these guys, like, you don't know what people are willing to pay. Like somebody could think Jameson Williams is like a top 10 wide receiver. I mean, someone could think that. Mm-hmm. And so on these guys that are super hot right now, it's certainly worth exploring some high-end options. I never get that's one thing that always tilted me about season-long bros. Like, I'll send you an offer, man. Don't get insulted. If you think it's fair, if you think it's an unfair trade, then decline it. Like, how could you send me such a lopsided offer, bro? Like, I don't know, man. We're starting a dialogue. Send me something back. Anyways, last one here, Jack. Alvin Kamara, sell high or hold on a guy who is just absolutely smashing me in the face so far this season.
Yeah, this is one where I could see people being split, and it really depends on what you can get for him. Like, if you can get like one of those elite, like Jahmyr Gibbs type running backs, I'd take Gibbs. But I think in general, if people are valuing him around where we have him ranked, I would just hold on to him. I mean, Jamal Williams had 2 carries in the first 3 quarters of the game. Kendry Miller looks like he's, a long way away from being a contributor for sure. Kamara has a 20% target share and an 18% target share last year. Like, high-end running backs are really hard to come by in most fantasy leagues. So unless you can get like a clear upgrade with someone who's valuing Kamara based on his scores from the first 2 weeks, I would just hold on to him.
Yeah. So I brought up the trade calculator here. For anybody who's watching on YouTube, you can see it. So I've just put in just like a random example: Alvin Kamara for Tank Dell and Zach Charbonnet. We have the Alvin Kamara side favored there by about 11%. I think that I agree. I'd rather hold Kamara than sell for a package like that, even though I really like both Tank Dell and Zach Charbonnet. I think I'd rather hold Kamara too. So that passes the eye test there. We also give some ideas here in the trade calculator what the other team could add maybe to make it more fair. But yeah, I think I'd be asking for more than this as a Kamara owner, I guess, is my point. All right. Let's get to some of your guys' questions. We did tweet and ask for questions. Appreciate everyone who sent them in. Kenneth says, is Deontay Johnson back in the mix as a startable option with Bryce Young heading to the bench and Dalton replacing him? Talked with Silva a little bit about this yesterday. When Andy Dalton has gotten snaps, he has been reasonable. 2022 with the Saints, he made some spot starts for the Panthers. I think Adam Thielen might have had a couple nice games with Andy Dalton in the mix there. Daigle, how would you value Deontay Johnson right now with the Red Rocket under center?
The best part about Deontay Johnson is that he takes pennies to acquire. So that's why he's someone I'm trying to buy, not even buy low, because it's not going to take anything. You can take Terry McLaurin, for example, and say, here, manager, I'll give you my problem for your problem, except no one's coming to save Terry McLaurin into the role he has under Cliff Kingsbury. Whereas we do have a lot more hope now to making Deontay Johnson a viable flex option under Dalton, who I don't care about the 300 yards last year in his only start because he threw 50 times. Of course, he went over 300 yards, but he was very accurate downfield. That has to help out a little bit. So, yeah, I like getting Deontay Johnson for pennies ahead of week 3.
Yeah.
You don't sound
anybody
convinced.
anybody who has Deontay Johnson's probably thinking the same thing. They're like, oh my God, my savior's here, Andy Dalton. And like, I don't want to sit here and say Andy Dalton is the savior for Deontay Johnson. I never thought that Deontay Johnson was going to be like, you guys don't understand. Once Bryce Young gets Deontay Johnson, he's gonna untap number 1 overall potential. Like, come on, I like Deontay Johnson, but come on, he's not like Jamar Chase or something like that. Everybody needs to relax.
I think the appeal on Carolina is just like how horrendous they've been. I don't think it's really hard to just wrap your head around the jump to potentially league average or below average that Andy Dalton can provide. Like, and I'm sure Adam Thielen has probably been dropped in some leagues. Like, I think if you could pick him up for free, that's interesting too. I think they could get to a baseline where it's, at least feasible to start them in fantasy.
Sure. But like, is Andy Dalton on the Panthers gonna be better than like Will Levis on the Titans? Like, do you guys really think that their offense will be more functional?
You're
asking that question at the wrong time. Different. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, Will Levis is gonna play better when their schedule softens. I'm not sure that they'll be, but I digress. Anyways, This was a related question from Hunter. He said, thoughts on the continued stashing of Jonathan Brooks in an IR spot with Andy Dalton, any change in outlook here, or better to bet on Bucky Irving, Tank Bigsby? So I think Daigle should take this as a 1 injury away type question. Although I guess Jonathan Brooks isn't really 1 injury away. But again, Daigle on the list is, of course, Bucky Irving and Tank Bigsby on the 1 injury away stuff. I should note Tank Bigsby is hurt right now. I haven't seen the severity on that. But yeah, Daigle, thoughts on Jonathan Brooks' stash now that we know the Red Rocket is in?
It's similar to Deontay Johnson in that this situation, although, yes, to you and I, it got better, as you said. That's how everyone, from your perspective, views it. But that's not the case if people are asking about Jonathan Brooks. Maybe someone doesn't see it like that. Whereas for Jonathan Brooks, the situation, of course, got better because we were betting on him with 8th-round draft capital with Bryce Young. So, yes, Jonathan Brooks, the situation got better. Like Mark said, I just want to buy in for nothing on the Panthers offense, especially when you look around the league right now and say, like, I don't know how many offenses we're still in on.
Yeah. So, like, the trade I just put in the calculator there, like, maybe you give up Hunter Henry and Jalen Tolbert, like 2 bench pieces you have to stash Jonathan Brooks. I think that would be interesting. We have the Jonathan Brooks side favored there by a pretty wide margin, and I think that that's right. We haven't mentioned the guy that everyone is claiming to be the best tight end in fantasy right now. And honestly, I'm not even sure I disagree. I prefer Trey McBride, but the people that want to say Brock Bowers is going to be the 2nd best tight end in fantasy this year, I mean, to me, that was why the Kelsey and Laporta stuff going high was so bad. I just thought Kincaid, McBride in the middle there was so strong that I didn't want to let it go down to the Bowers range. But anyways, S. Rob says, in a standard home league, what tier is fair value for Brock Bowers? He is my backup behind Laporta. I'm being offered Xavier Worthy or Brian Thomas for him. Well, S. Rob, I have good news, buddy. Trade calculator is here. Mark, can you read that to me one more time so I can get the inputs in here while I tech lord? It's Brock Bowers for...
Yep, he said he's being offered Xavier Worthy or Brian Thomas for him, if that would be fair.
We have Bowers favored pretty decently as over Xavier Worthy, not by a ton, and then over Brian Thomas, we have roughly in the same range there. So we do prefer Brock Bowers to both of those guys. I think the context around this, though, Mark, is that it's his backup. And a lot of people who have Brock Bowers, it's going to be their backup tight end, not their starter. In situations like that, I am more willing to take maybe the slightly worse end of the trade just to get another starter for my team, especially if I have injuries. So I would strongly consider Brock Bowers for Worthy or Brian Thomas. There might be some other guys that I like better than them. But yeah, any thoughts on that, Mark?
I certainly think that's a fine deal to make. I also think with the Panthers coming to town this week to Las Vegas, that Brock Bowers value could even increase one more week. If you're not dying to make that deal immediately, you could potentially see it increase, or maybe just ring your friends a little bit to try and get a better wide receiver. I do think that's a decent range to target, kind of the Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas guys. I think that's solid, especially since you have Sam Laporta as your starter. So maybe see if you could get another ounce of value out of your league mates there, and potentially hold on with the Panthers defense coming to town. But in general, that's a great position to be in, having Laporta and Bowers and being able to flip one to bolster another section of your roster.
Yeah, getting greedy. The only thing I'd say is that every time a player steps on the field, there's a chance they get hurt, And so if Bowers is your backup and you get a good deal, I'm not against it. I might be aiming like a little bit higher than that worthy tier, but I wouldn't want to get too greedy with it. Wide receivers we have around Brock Bowers in the rankings are like Diggs, Flowers, Jameson Williams, Waddle. You see Worthy down there, Tank Dell as well. Michael Pittman, Brian Thomas are also kind of in that same tier. 40-yard stash says, who is a realistic trade option for Tyreek Hill? I'm in need of RBs, and I see no hope for Skyler being able to get him the ball. So we already talked about this, man. I mean, it sucks, but no one's going to value Tyreek Hill at what I think if Tua comes back in week 8 that he's worth, And so it's going to be really hard for you to get fair value. You're going to have to come way down here on our ranks, I think, to get someone to accept something like Tyreek for Kyren or Tyreek for Derrick Henry or something like that. I think maybe you can get that deal through. I don't think you're going to get any like really elite running backs, like top 20 overall type running backs for Tyreek Hill. But yeah, Jack, any more thoughts on a trade option here, Tyreek Hill situation?
Yeah, I don't really think I would go below Gibbs in our rankings. Like, I don't think I would trade Tyreek for Kyren or Jacobs. I do still think Tua comes back. It would be, it's an unprecedented situation, but generally, even with rough injuries, we've seen once guys are cleared, they do come back. 4 weeks is a lot of time for concussion, so they are playing it safe. I don't know if it's the right or the wrong decision. I don't know the full scope of the situation, but I would guess that Tua is back this season. And once that happens, I mean, Tyreek is immediately back as a top 5 player. So I probably would not trade Tyreek for Jonathan Taylor right now. But that's just how I see it.
Yeah, well, along these lines, like to me, these are the kind of offers that you can get for Tyreek, right? City Mantis says, I have Achane, Jacobs, and Jordan Mason. Would you trade Jacobs for Tyreek or London? In other words, like if you have running back depth, you can probably get Tyreek for Josh Jacobs now, right? And like that would be a winner in our trade calculator right now. So yeah. All right. Let's go back here. Thoughts on moving Jamar Chase for Olave and Pollard. All right, I'm going to put this through the trade calculator here. Mark, if you can read it to me, if I can tech lord back to it. Draft kit.
Yeah, we've got Jamar Chase on one side, and then Chris Olave and Tony Pollard on the other.
All right. Trade calculator says, oh my God, I don't think I've ever seen this one.
It's a dead heat.
Stone close fair, 0.76% different. A stone cold fair trade. Go ahead, Daigle. You have to decide now. The trade calculator won't give you the answer. You actually need to decide. Go ahead.
Roster for roster. It's just based on what you have around, which I know is the political.
No,
answer,
you're not allowed to say that. No.
And
you're not
Jamar
allowed to say
Chase
that.
and Tony Pollard, they're all buys. Jamar Chase
you're
in
not
particular.
Allowed to say that, Daigle. You have to take a side.
Jamar
you cannot
Chase
say it depends on your roster.
Okay, I will pick Jamar Chase side, if only because it's the Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors argument we had last week, and that you only get so few opportunities in fantasy football every year to buy elite players at their lowest points. I can give you all the target numbers. It doesn't matter. It's as simple as it's Jamar Chase, and you can get him right now.
Yeah. To me, it depends on what you think of Jamar Chase. There's some people out there that I've seen, like, and not even, mouth-breathing idiots. Like, I've seen some reasonable people say Jamar Chase has just flat out not been that good for the last year or so, period. I don't think that's really the case. I think he's going to see a huge spike in targets starting this week. And I like buying low on Jamar Chase, especially ahead of this Commanders matchup. But I do have Olave takes also, and I'll get to that in the move to make section. Last one here from Tenty51 says, need some help at running back. Currently have strong wide receivers. Thoughts on moving Brian Thomas? What should I expect in return? So we talked about the Jaguars a little bit already. Mark, what do you think about a trade involving Brian Thomas here?
He's got a stable of wide receivers of Malik Neighbors, Rashid Rice, Drake London, and Deontay Johnson. That's pretty legit. I do think you could, if you needed running back help, that's probably where I would look to, or tight end. Potentially, I think, we talked about kind of the Bowers and Sam Laporta range. I do think maybe you could get one of those guys, either Laporta or Trey McBride, potentially at tight end, if you wanted to upgrade there with Brian Thomas. I kind of like that range. If you're looking at running backs, maybe it's like a James Cook, although he just went off. Running backs, I think, are probably harder to trade for right now, just because they've been so successful early on. So I would maybe go for a tight end there. But I guess he says he needs help
Yeah.
at RB. So maybe like a James Conner who will give you great short-term value, and you can grind the waiver wire for potential long-term upside there if you need immediate help. Maybe even Jordan Mason, for short-term. I'm not sure if Brian Thomas would get that done necessarily, but certainly, kind of like in that RB2 range, I think is probably solid for Brian Thomas.
My gut is that most people will not view Brian Thomas the way that we do, right? And so that means it's like a bad time to trade him away. I don't think that people, like, if you offered someone Brian Thomas for James Conner, I think they'd laugh in your face. They'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, why would I trade James Conner for Brian Thomas? So I think if you want to trade Brian Thomas right now, I actually think you have to go way down here. I think you have to go to like Rashad White, David Montgomery, Mark mentioned Jordan Mason, Tony Pollard, like Zach Moss. I don't think you're going to get much more than that for Brian Thomas right now. If you're really desperate at running back, I wouldn't necessarily hate that. But yeah, just know you're taking the worst of it, I think.
If any of my league mates are listening, they understand your comment of laughing in my face at potential trade requests out there, because I'm typically not the best trader in my home leagues.
All right. We've said it all. We've said too much, actually. Let's get to everyone's favorite portion of the program. One move to make. I meant to write down all our moves to make from last week so we could track it, but alas, I forgot yet again. However, we move on. I will give Daigle the floor first. One move to make for you ahead of week 3.
Tank Dell is third in target share right now behind Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs. But similar to selling Stephon Diggs after his 2 touchdown performance in week 1, we're looking at the peripherals. And Tank Dell right now has a team-high 14.5-yard depth of target with 5 carries compared to Diggs' 5.5-yard depth of target underneath. Not only that, but you couldn't even trade for him, honestly, if C.J. Stroud would have just delivered the right pass and Tank Dell could have ran open for a 50-yard touchdown on Sunday night. So Tank Dell, buy low.
Yes, I did that one last week now that it jogs my memory, and it did not go well, but I will still be buying low here on Tank Dell. Just one of the few pass games I actually feel really good about for the whole year. Like, I mean, there's very few pass games I'm like, even the Chiefs, I'm like, man. But the Texans, they're going to be able to throw the football and throw it well and throw it down the field all year, no matter what happens with this cover 2 NFL shift nonsense. All right. Mark, go ahead with your one move to make ahead of week 3.
I think now is the perfect time to buy Zach Moss, Cincinnati Bengals running back. Through 2 weeks, Zach Moss has nearly 3 times as many snaps as Chase Brown, 3 times as many carries. He's run twice as many routes and has nearly twice as many targets as well to Chase Brown. This was a ambiguous backfield coming into the season, and I think through 2 weeks, it's clearly tilted in Zach Moss's favor. He also is getting the high value touches. He has 5 carries inside the 10-yard line, 2 inside the 5-yard line through 2 weeks. Burrow's QB sneak attempt where he got lit up against the Chiefs is the only other Bengals rush attempt inside the 10-yard line this year. So I think now is a great time to buy Zach Moss. The Bengals get the Commanders, Panthers, Ravens, and Giants in the next 4 weeks. Obviously, the Ravens there, potential strong, tough matchup, but Commanders, Panthers, and Giants, the Bengals should all be touchdown favorites. Bengals have the highest team total of the week in week 3. So I think now is a perfect time to buy low on Zach Moss.
Yeah, I mean, if you need running back help, man, and you like Zach Moss, like, I don't want people to take the trade calculator and be like, oh my God, I can't do this deal. The trade calculator says it's bad. There's more to it than that, right? So if you have Brian Thomas, you need running back help, and somebody wants to do Brian Thomas for Zach Moss, like, I think you're taking the worst of it. I prefer Brian Thomas, but there's more to it than that. You know what I mean? So I don't think that's like the end of the world as a deal. All right. Jack, your move to make ahead of week 3.
Yeah, Daigle told me mine was weak before the show, but I'm gonna stick with it, and I'm gonna say sell Carson Steele. I think there's some chance that maybe you could wait a week and sell him for even more, but I also think there's some chance that his value just completely dissipates. I think in week 2 it was a really good sign that he fumbled, and then they immediately went back to him with a goal line snap and the final carry of the game before that Harrison Butker game-winning field goal. But this is still a guy who was an undrafted free agent, listed at a lot of spots as a fullback, averaged 5.1 yards per carry at UCLA, and then ran a 4.740. Like, I don't really have high hopes for Carson Steele maintaining value. especially with Samaje Perine taking all of the passing down stuff. Clyde Edwards-Helaire could be back at any time. He could be not back at all, but they have Kareem Hunt on the practice squad, who they have a ton of familiarity with. I think Steele is the odds-on favorite to lead the Chiefs in carries this week, and he probably gets the goal line stuff too. But I think that in 3 weeks, that's a much I don't know if that will still be the case. So yeah, I just can't see Steele maintaining value for an extended period of time. So I would be selling with all the buzz around him right now.
Agreed. I mean, if you can get someone to buy into this, oh, he's the starting running back for one of the best offenses in the league, and sell him 100%. 100% should do it. Okay. My move to make is going to be for a guy who really liked before the season as kind of a late second round pick. Has not worked out so far. However, Chris Olave did get tackled at the 1 yard line on a sick catch. And frankly, Saints just haven't been pushed yet. But most important to me is what I said at the beginning about the Saints stuff. They are only using 3 players on offense, and they have one of the most efficient offenses in the league. Even if they regress, and let's say they are the 10th best offense in the league or the 14th best offense in the league, when you're only using 3 guys, all 3 of those guys are going to get smacked in the face with the ball and fantasy production at some point. As much as I like Rashid Shaheed, he is not Chris Olave. I mean, he's just not. And so we still have Chris Olave up here at 16 overall. I'm sure that most of your league mates probably value him way lower than that. I would try to trade for Chris Olave ahead of week 3. Just look at the box score. You know, when you send the trade offer, hey, here's what he's done through 2 games, guys. That's all that matters. Easy game. All right. That is going to do it for this week's rest of season top 150 show. You do have access to the rest of season top 150, which we will continue to update through the rest of the week if you are a DraftKit Pro subscriber. Also, trade calculator up, running, working. Play around with it. It's fun. Just don't send me, I can't do this trade because the trade calculator doesn't like it by 10 spots. Like, there's some more feel to it based on team needs. So be sure to factor that in to the trade calculator as well. For producer Ryan, for Daigle, for Mark, for Jack, for everyone behind the scenes, which is an absolute army at this point, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.